Well, the first year that I lived in Seattle, we had an unseasonably warm winter. And I remember like that was my sort of biggest fear moving to Seattle was like the dark and the rain and just like people talk about it like it's such an intimidating thing. And that's not to say that it's not. Like it does get dark and there are winters that have felt kind of oppressive where you're like it's been gray for 49 days. Like, where is the sun? What, what's happening? Uh, but the first winter I experienced here was actually like an extraordinarily easy one. And we had like a streak of like 60-degree days in February. And I actually remember meeting up with my sister in like early March and we both freckle a lot in the sun and I had more freckles than her and she was living in Florida at the time. And we were like, oh, this is interesting. She was probably wearing more sun protection than I was. So like, that's probably why. But we were laughing that like that could happen to me in Seattle in the winter. I think like core, the fall actually is lovely. So when you arrive, like the first 2 months, September and October, I would advise arriving early if folks can, because Seattle summer is like not a secret. It's wonderful. It's really beautiful. It's lovely. When there's no smoke, there is wildfire smoke, unfortunately. That does occasionally dampen the glory, but for the most part, like you just get these streaks of like 75-degree sunny days and like kind of no chance of rain. Like I grew up with thunderstorms, which occasionally I miss, but like when it comes to like planning an activity outdoors, you're like guaranteed for it to be nice out from like the joke is it starts July 5th and then goes to about like September 15th or so, I would say. But even the fall is really lovely. There's a lot of great things to be said about like the milder days in September and October as well. And then, yeah, in that November, December timeframe, you start to transition and it starts to get a little bit darker. I personally don't find that time of year too difficult because people are like putting up holiday lights and you're sort of fine. It's the transition to January that gets hard. And I think most people have a hard time with. I know I shouldn't be advocating leaving Seattle, but a tip for success that I was told by someone who grew up here was like, if you're not leaving to see the sun in January or February at some point, like you're making a mistake. Like you've done winter wrong here. Like, but if you're a winter sports person, there's plenty to do and enjoy within really close proximity to the city. So I think like I have a lot of colleagues at my outdoorsy nonprofit job who, just spend all winter skiing or snowshoeing or cross country skiing or something. And there's more snow up. I mean, there's more sun even up in the mountains sometimes than there is down here. There are also corners of Washington. We think of like the Olympic Peninsula out here, which is, probably a 3 hour, I mean, you can drive a lot farther than that and still be on the Olympic Peninsula, but like to get over there, it's about 3 hours from Seattle. And maybe you're familiar with like Forks from Twilight or something like that, the rainiest place in the lower 48. But there are also corners of the Olympic Peninsula, like the city of Sequim, that receive like more sunshine than Seattle or like some parts of the east side of the state. So like there's certainly places to go to enjoy yourself and plenty of things to do. I think that the best thing is like to get a good raincoat and admit that like a little drizzle shouldn't stop you from doing something outside, because usually that's what it is. It's like a light drizzle. It's not like a hard rain that like you need an umbrella and like rain boots for kind of thing. So there's a hardiness that I think you eventually adapt. There's also a lack of cold hardiness. Like I was used to commuting in Boston at like 15 degrees in like a business skirt and tights and like winter boots, but still like part of your leg exposed. And now I wear like a huge winter puffy jacket when it's like 40 degrees outside. And I think about what my previous self would say to that. But then spring also arrives here really early. We just had the big peak bloom of the cherry blossoms, and UW has a famous collection of them that hopefully you've seen photos of. And they're amazing, but they're also just cherry blossoms all over the city. I have a particular route around my neighborhood that I walk to visit my favorite trees several times each year when they're blooming. So we actually have a lot of family who come to visit us from the East Coast this time of year, and they're always like, oh, it's so green here. Everything's blooming. Like the weather might not have turned super nice, but everything's really alive, which feels very different from like the Northeast where things are still like, nothing's blooming yet. It's all still kind of in its dormancy winter phase. And then, of course, the second you finish with school, maybe do an internship that summer and have less free time in the middle of the day is like right when it's its nicest. But definitely summer here is really, in my opinion, like unparalleled.